Thank you for joining us tonight on the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm your host, Steve Lance, and here's a look at some of the stories we've been covering for you today. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor's false claim about COVID-19 sparks a round of fact checks. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky also disputes the claim. As Omicron spreads, AOC, along with other members of Congress, all test positive for the CCP virus. And so-called voting rights legislation is a top priority for the Democratic Party's agenda going into the new year. We take a look at some of the changes they're seeking in our voting laws. Congressman Jim Jordan says he will not cooperate with the House January 6 committee. Last month, the panel requested an interview with Jordan. They asked him to disclose conversations he had with Trump on the day of the Capitol breach. Jordan sent a letter to the committee chairman saying that the request is unreasonable and violates constitutional principles. He says it would serve to further erode legislative norms. Jordan was one of former President Trump's main defenders during his 2 impeachment trials. Both times, the Senate acquitted Trump. This year, House Republicans nominated Jordan to the January 6th committee, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected him. She says it's because Jordan believes there was fraud in the 2020 presidential election. And Representative Madison Cawthorn from North Carolina is now facing some backlash over January 6th. A group of 11 voters in his state is filing a lawsuit to prevent him from running for re-election. They argue that his involvement in a rally before the Capitol breach violates the 14th Amendment and that it constitutionally bars him from starting another campaign. Top on President Biden's agenda right now is what he is calling voting rights reform. Here with us to find out exactly what this means is Heritage Foundation legal fellow Zach Smith. Zach Smith, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
Zach, President Biden and the Democrats are making a big push for voting rights. Voting rights sounds noble and something that most people would be on board with. If you could just unpack a little bit about what this new bill that they're trying to push would actually do.
Well, unfortunately, I think this is the latest iteration of what's really a partisan power grab by many of the Democratic senators on Capitol Hill right now. You know, we've seen voting rights legislation, so-called voting rights legislation being pushed really for much of the last year. It started out with the For the People Act, then we've seen the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and now we're seeing it in the Freedom to Vote Act. Which unfortunately continues to push many of the very bad, very dangerous, very problematic policies of these previous bills. Essentially, what the Freedom to Vote Act, when combined with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, would do, it would essentially federalize many aspects of our electoral process, aspects that have never been federalized before. It would take away control from state and local governments. It would essentially forbid states from implementing many common sense election integrity procedures, things like requiring the photo ID in order to vote, maintaining their voter rolls, making sure they're accurate and up to date. It would require states to implement unsecure practices like automatic voter registration, and the list really goes on and on. But essentially, it's a set of very bad policies that's really being pushed right now, I think, in an attempt to gain a partisan political advantage.
Now, one thing, correct me if I'm wrong, that I saw would be included here is something along the lines of universal mail-in voting. If that is the case, why do you think the Democrats are so adamant about this particular part of the bill?
Well, it's really a great question because we all know that mail-in voting, voting by mail, is inherently less secure than in-person voting. And look, this really isn't a partisan position. When former President Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, co-chaired an election integrity commission, one of the major shortcomings in our electoral system, one of the major vulnerabilities they pointed out was that voting by mail was less secure than in-person voting. And I think it's important to realize not only would this bill require states to allow basically no excuse absentee voting, anyone could get an absentee ballot for any reasons, it would prohibit states from then requiring safeguards, like requiring that the ballot be notarized. It would implement very onerous signature comparison restrictions, making it very difficult to discard or discount a ballot if someone's signature did not match their signature on file. And so again, these are I think, bills being pushed for partisan political purposes that, rather than making our elections more secure, would in fact make them less secure and would fundamentally alter how elections are conducted in our country.
Now, Zach, what is this talk about carving out or a carve out to avoid the filibuster all about?
Right. Well, I think you have to view this legislation through the lens of the filibuster debate that's going on right now in the Senate. And really, I think the Democratic members of the Senate are trying to push this voting rights legislation as a potential wedge issue to reform or really abolish the filibuster in the Senate. And it's important to realize all the filibuster requires is that in order to end debate on any piece of legislation, essentially 2/3 of the senators have to agree. And so what the Democratic members of the Senate are trying to do right now, they're trying to essentially abolish the filibuster, alter this time-honored tradition of the Senate, and transform it so that only a majority of votes would be needed to pass through many of their radical pieces of legislation. And so unfortunately, I think, again, as I've said before, these bills are being pushed for partisan political purposes. They're being pushed in hopes of creating a wedge issue so that the filibuster can be altered or abolished, and that will open the door for members, the Democratic members of the Senate, to continue to push and hope, and in their view, try to succeed in getting accomplished many of their radical policy goals.
Zach Smith, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
Top U.S. officials today met with Russian officials in Geneva amid concerns of a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. The talks didn't yield any major breakthroughs, but Congress is ready to crack down on Russia with a bill to sanction the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Biden lifted those sanctions back in May, but under renewed pressure over Russia, will Democrats move to defy the White House? NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
Democrats on Capitol Hill have some tough decisions to make when it comes to Russia. This week, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is bringing a bill to the floor that would reimpose sanctions on the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline. In the past, many Democrats have joined Republicans in supporting these sanctions, but back in May, President Biden single-handedly waived those sanctions. He's hoping to deal with Russia through negotiation talks. Those negotiation talks kicked off this week, but U.S. officials say there's been little to no progress made so far.
We were firm, however, in pushing back on security proposals that are simply non-starters for the United States.
The U.S. insists that progress depends on de-escalation. Russia has amassed nearly 100,000 troops near Ukraine, although Putin denies that the action is a plan to invade.
There's a path of dialogue and diplomacy to try to resolve some of these differences and avoid a confrontation. The other path is confrontation and massive consequences for Russia if it renews its aggression on Ukraine.
But the administration wants to avoid the Nord Stream pipeline. Biden in May waived sanctions, and critics say it gave Putin a political hand over Europe. Now Congress wants to take matters in their own hands. This week, senators will vote on a bill to sanction the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline, a move that's historically been bipartisan. Democrat Senator Jeanne Shaheen co-authored a bill with Republican Senator Rob Portman, urging the Biden administration to seriously reconsider the imposition of the Nord Stream 2 sanctions. And Democrat Senator Menendez was upset with Biden waiving the sanctions too, and he urged the administration to, quote, rip off the Band-Aid, lift these waivers. Now this bill, led by Senator Ted Cruz, is coming to the floor this week, giving Democrats the chance to force Biden's hand to reinstate the sanctions. But will they move to defy the White House?
Melina, President Biden waived sanctions on Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and he faced pushback in Congress from both Republicans and many lawmakers in his own party. Considering that Democrats do support these sanctions and want to see them back in place, does it look like Senator Cruz's efforts here will meet with success?
Well, Senator Cruz has said that many Democrats have told him that they are going to vote for it or they're strongly considering it. But some Democrats have said they think it goes too far. Now, the question that these Senate Democrats are posed with right now is whether they're more willing to uphold their tough on Russia stance by voting to pass this, or if they're more committed to following President Biden's strategy when it comes to this. Now, it does need 60 votes to pass, so we'll see later this week how the vote unfolds.
So what's the White House's response to this? Does the Biden administration still stand by the decision to waive those sanctions now, even as this tension is unfolding in Ukraine?
Well, it does look like President Biden is standing by his decision to waive those sanctions, but Biden has multiple times warned Putin that he would impose harsh economic sanctions if Russia does choose to invade Ukraine. But those sanctions may not include sanctions on this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And at the same time, the White House is working with Congress on a separate package of sanctions just to prepare in the case that Russia does move forward with this invasion of Ukraine. But they're really trying to steer clear of that pipeline. They don't want to risk ruining relations between Germany and other European countries. So it will be pretty interesting to see how President Biden responds if congressional Democrats do move forward and vote to impose these sanctions on this pipeline. Steve?
NTD's Melina Wisecup, thank you for that. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor made a false claim about children being hospitalized with COVID-19, sparking a rare fact check. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky also disputed the claim. Sotomayor last Friday made the statement while hearing lawsuits challenging President Biden's vaccine mandate for private businesses. Sotomayor last Friday made the statement while hearing lawsuits challenging President Biden's vaccine mandate for private businesses.
We have over 100,000 children, which we've never had before, in serious condition, and many on ventilators.
During an interview with Fox News Sunday, CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky confirmed that the actual number is around 3,500, not 100,000.
Understood, but the number is not 100,000. It's roughly 3,500 in hospitals now.
Yes, there are, and in fact, what I will say is, while pediatric hospitalizations are rising, they're still about 15-fold less than hospitalizations of our older age demographics.
And Congressman Byron Donalds asked on Twitter, how can Justice Sotomayor be this wrong about COVID-19? I wonder if at Twitter we'll find these purveyors of COVID-19 misinformation and suspend their accounts. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin returned to work today after a negative COVID test. A week ago, Austin tested positive for the CCP virus and has been quarantining at his home. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said that Austin is grateful for the efficacy of the vaccine as he only experienced mild symptoms. With the rise of Omicron, a number of Pentagon employees are working remotely. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has tested positive for the CCP virus. Her office reported Sunday that she is experiencing symptoms and is recovering at home. The New York Democrat is fully vaccinated and has received her booster shot. AOC was criticized by Republicans while being spotted maskless at a brunch in Miami, Florida on January 2nd. Today, New York Republican John Katko says that he tested positive and will be voting by proxy. Republican Ben Cline of Virginia announced that he tested positive on Saturday. Virginia Governor Ralph Northam on Monday declared a 30-day state of emergency as hospitalizations in the Commonwealth hit record highs.
We're taking action today to help our hospitals.
Governor Northam said his order will allow hospitals to expand bed capacity and give more flexibility in staffing. As of January 9th, over 3,500 patients are hospitalized statewide as a result of the CCP virus. There are 314 patients on ventilator support as of January 10th. ICU COVID hospitalizations have more than doubled, increasing from 235 to 567 patients since December 1st, 2021. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin announced on Sunday that he's running for re-election this year. He's seeking a third term in office. The race for his seat could determine control of the United States Senate. The 66-year-old Republican senator has previously said that he would retire after the current term ends. Johnson explains why he's changed his mind. He wrote in a Wall Street Journal opinion piece that, quote, "I will continue to fight for freedom in the public realm by running for re-election. It's not a decision I have made lightly." He says that he did not anticipate, quote, "the pandemic, the government's failed response to it, the loss of freedom that has resulted, and the tyrannical approach taken by the elites who have created and maintained a state of fear that allows them to exercise control over American lives," end quote. Johnson's seat in Wisconsin is considered one of the 6 Senate seats most likely to flip in 2022. A crowded field of challengers is vying for the Democratic nomination, including Wisconsin's lieutenant governor and treasurer. Johnson's decision comes just one day after Senate Minority Whip John Thune also announced that he is seeking re-election. This makes Johnson the latest incumbent Republican to do so. With cost of goods continuing to rise, we speak to finance expert and Wall Street professional Charles Mizrahi to find out where things might be heading. Starting from this Saturday, D.C. restaurants and bars will be required to check if their customers have vaccination proof. Owners and customers have mixed feelings about this new rule. Top House Republicans are urging the D.C. mayor to withdraw a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. The mandate is set to take effect this weekend for indoor businesses. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capital Report. With high inflation lingering, Goldman Sachs now forecasts the Federal Reserve is likely to raise interest rates 4 times this year, in March, June, September, and December. The bank previously predicted only 3 hikes in 2022. Rate hikes will raise the cost of mortgages, car loans, and credit cards. Consumer prices jumped almost 7% in November, reaching a nearly 4-decade high. A poll from the Associated Press finds that the economy, particularly inflation, have now become Americans' top political concern. Just a year ago, the virus was the top concern for Americans. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is going to discuss inflation and interest hikes at his confirmation hearing on Tuesday. With prices continuing to rise and Americans becoming increasingly weary and looking for answers, we have financial expert and author of Wall Street Profits for Main Street Investors, Charles Mizrahi, here to discuss. Charles Mizrahi, thank you so much for joining us on the Capital Report.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Charles, we're seeing and hearing reports of empty shelves in supermarkets throughout the Washington, D.C. area. Do you think this is a result of supply chain or pandemic panic buying?
Or third thing is basically people have the flu. There are a lot of people who were out. Airlines canceled thousands of flights over a couple of days last week and the week before. And it's just a fact of life. We're in flu season. People are getting sick. I know in my house, 1 or 2 of my kids and myself were sick for a while. And it's really just a convergence of problems. We have a supply chain issue which never went away. In fact, is going to be an issue for a while. I don't know how long, but it'll take a while to start the supply chain up again due to disruptions from COVID. You have people who are panic buying, and you have a situation where there are fewer people working on the factory floors and in the slaughterhouses. So it is what it is.
Now, with all things considered, you could start to see the frustration of people not being able to get the things they normally want. In many cases now with inflation, people are paying a lot more and they're not happy. This seems to be becoming a quality of life issue for many people. How do you think this will wind up translating in the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, elections are won and lost by the economy. No 2 ways about it. And the best example, of course, is Bill Clinton. He took a sitting president who had a 90% plus approval rating after the Gulf War and actually won because it was the economy stupid. Just focus on that. And the real situation here is that Washington has not been acting fiscally responsible since the Biden administration took over in terms of trying to flood the market with more liquidity, which is driving up prices even more because now you have a whole lot of dollars chasing a whole limited supply of items and prices are rising. So really the ballot box will be the best way to oversee this and fight this. But when we don't elect people who are fiscally responsible, who probably never sign the front of a check, we get what we get.
So on that issue, are there any policy issues that you think would help to turn around the situation, whether implementing or getting rid of?
Well, look, during the Trump presidency, the Trump administration, we saw two things, and this worked even during Reagan. It just works. Lower taxes and limit regulation. You do those two things, businesses can flourish. Any person who's in business, anyone who has a business, a lemonade stand, will tell you higher regulations and higher taxes stymies business. Move those two impediments away and things happen. Good things happen. And thank God we came into this crisis, into this pandemic, with a very strong economy, because if it wasn't for that, we'd be in serious trouble. So if there's anything that Washington can do is lower the regulations and stop with all these tax increases. It's just gonna strangle business.
And Charles, I just want to get your thoughts before I let you go here. When it comes to inflation, what is the outlook from your opinion?
Well, it's going to be here for a while. I don't know how long, and I don't want to look like a fool 3 months or 6 months and trying to make any prediction, because the economies are extremely, extremely intricate. Peter Lynch, one of the great money managers back in the late 70s and early 80s, he said that if you spend 13 minutes a year trying to figure out the economy or the market, you're wasting 10 minutes. It's extremely difficult to do, and I won't try to do it here. But I will say this, is that we are in a situation here where the economy is doing a lot better than anyone thought. Washington flooded the market with more liquidity, which drove up prices, because now you have assets increasing, people feeling wealthier, paying more, and chasing a limited supply. That's what happens when you have inflation. And the Fed is trying to tap the brakes in the economy by all these rate hikes they're talking about this year. But inflation will be here for a while. I don't know if it's transitory. I don't know if it's permanent. I really couldn't tell you. But over the foreseeable future, the next several months, be prepared to pay higher prices.
Charles Mizrahi, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Starting this Saturday, many D.C. businesses, including restaurants and bars, will be required to check their customers for vaccination status. The move is getting mixed responses from patrons and business owners. As Omicron quickly spread in D.C., Mayor Muriel Bowser announced the vaccination requirement for restaurants and bars back in December. Business owners have been preparing for it since then, but will it really be helpful in stopping the virus?
We obviously don't know, but if it helps a little bit, then yes, it'd be a good idea.
Restaurants should be able to create their own mandates. It's supposed to be a free country, so you should be able to make your own decisions when it comes to stuff like that.
Restaurant owner Jeff Tracy told WTOP that he has mixed feelings about the effectiveness of the measures, noting that even with mask mandates, people must remove their masks to eat and drink.
I think there's no impact on people who really want to go to eat in the restaurants.
Right now, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia have different COVID guidelines. That has resulted in confusion and anger among some customers. Owners are also concerned that their customers would take their business to areas outside of D.C. that don't have mandates. Some top House Republicans are urging D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser to drop a COVID-19 vaccine mandate for indoor businesses. The rule is set to take effect on January 15th. 19 Republican lawmakers wrote a letter to the mayor today, saying that the mandate would, quote, harm the district's economic recovery and lock many Americans out of their capital city. They added that the order will be ineffective at stopping viral spread, as the spread of the Omicron among the vaccinated population indicates. That's all we have for you tonight on the Capitol Report. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Steve Lance. We'll be back tomorrow with more of the latest news direct from our nation's capital. Thank you for watching, and have a great evening.